See,
This
we've got people
conference will
coming in.
now be recorded.
Hi, everybody. We're just waiting another minute or so to give the people the opportunity to come on board. We'll start around 4:01 or 4:02, and Humphrey, I think you had a good idea with the it's sort of interesting the 4 half-hour sessions as opposed to a 2-hour session. I'm noticing that the number of people attending is increasing and increasing with each with each webinar that we do. It's interesting. Hopefully,
it's sort of like a super spreader.
right? Don't go there, but just don't go there.
Well, I just came in out of the field. I was mowing the field, and this is a wonderful, pleasant break for me to get off that field.
Oh, hot out there, huh?
It's hot, dusty too. We need rain badly.
Okay, everybody. I think we can get going. I'm looking to see. I think Humphrey will be back in a second. He's last on our speaker list. Hi, I'm Jean Davies. I'm the Executive Director of Connecticut Resource Conservation and Development. And I'm hoping this doesn't feedback on me. So what we're doing is a project that is part of our Environmental Review Team program. Our Environmental Review Team program with Connecticut RC&D is about 50 years old. And what we do is we bring solutions to municipalities and land trusts in the arena of natural resources and land use practices, and we bring together a series of volunteers, professional volunteers who have provided their time. We've quite a number of volunteers over many years have provided their time. We're on our over 1,000 reports, and this particular project is unique. We have another one that's sort of similar for the airline trail, but the 12 towns of, John, the next slide. Let's see if I've got that. So the 12 of the 17 towns of the lower Connecticut River Valley joined together, and through Margot Burns applied for a Connecticut RC&D ERT review. And the goals here are listed. We have assisting to seek funding, facilitating discussion between scientists and stakeholders, and raising public awareness through the ERT process. And that is what these webinars are for. We're looking to engage stakeholders and build momentum with regard to this issue, which is an ongoing and problematic concern for the lower Connecticut River Valley. Today, I would ask that if any of you have your mics on, that you mute your mics, because we'll start getting some feedback, and I will do so in a moment. And if you don't already know, today, if you didn't get your invite through Eventbrite, we have today Judy Preston from Yukon Sea Grant, Margot Burns from the lower Connecticut River Valley, and Humphrey Tyler from the Friends of Whalebone Cove to present on the findings of what they're finding in the river, how they've been trying to work through partnerships on both a volunteer level, a regional level, and through a professional educational level. These webinars will be posted on our website, and I will send a link to all attendees with the link to get to the website. But basically, you can go to Connecticut Resource Conservation Development's website and find these webinars. It may take a little while to get this together. We do a little bit of editing just to bloop out any of the things that might happen, like a weird screenshot or whatever. So if it takes a little while, bear with us. And without further ado, John, you want to go to the next slide? I would also like to thank John Guskowski, who, if we were going to be relying on my internet, which I know we now have 2 internets at our house, it would be pretty sad. So John Guskowski of it's CHA, right, John?
That's right.
Yep, and Associates is hosting with their capable and fast and speedy internet speed, and we're very grateful for that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Judy Preston, our Long Island Sound Outreach Coordinator for the University of Connecticut Sea Grant Program, who will take you on a tour of the lower Connecticut River and the issues facing aquatic invasives. I know that she and Margot Burns have worked, because I used to work with them a long time ago, about 5 years ago, and they worked very closely on this issue and have, I think you'll appreciate some of the knowledge base that is going to be provided at today's webinar. Judy, take it away.
All right.
John, next slide. There you go.
Everybody here all right? Okay. I actually, I'm looking at my section here to get us all on the same page. I know that a lot of you are people who have worked on the lower river and are familiar with how great it is. And actually, you don't have to have been here a long time to be on the river and know how great it is. But I always feel like it's important to make sure that we recognize what's at stake in terms of the loss of diversity and all kinds of amenities that are offered by the estuary, the lower Connecticut River estuary, if we do nothing in the face of aquatic invasives. There are enough threats without these invasives, but in the last couple of years, I think we have really discovered that the threat is not only real, but it is, we're at a turning point in terms of the river, in terms of what can happen. So I just wanted to be able to take a moment to remind us that this place, this lower Connecticut River estuary, has no less than 9 designations, national, international designations of, pointing to its significance. We're halfway between New York and Boston. We've got this series of salt, brackish, and freshwater tidal marshes, and within that context, we've got creeks and riverine systems. And there are any number of reports that have talked about why it's significant. The quote that I've used here actually came out of a publication that Connecticut College put together, but they all tend to point to the same thing. It's one of the least disturbed large river tidal marsh system in the United States, the most pristine large river tidal marsh system in the Northeast. There are all of these great things that point to this place on the planet, and we live here. We live in this area. So I'm happy to see that RC&D has put together this dialogue, because we are all stewards in some respect for this extraordinary place. If you can go to the next slide, please, John. One of the things that by looking at aquatic invasives, the reason why we're looking at them, and we're talking about Trappa, but also hydrilla, and we'll hear about hydrilla on Thursday from Greg Busby, is that we have so much of the biological diversity that's concentrated in this lower portion of the river that depends on clean water, that depends on the regular exchange of tides and nutrients that come down the river and resources that come up from Long Island Sound. It is when you think of how long the system has been evolving and co-evolving so that species are all dependent on the natural resources that are part of a healthy system, what we are looking at when that disappears is not just the clarity of water, as you can see in this picture here that shows what clean water looks like. This is the mouth of Whalebone Cove, but also some of the species that rely on that clean water. We're looking at the Vallisneria, the tape grass, and in clean, shallow, sandy waters, and not very far from where this photograph was taken, further down the neck of the inlet that goes into Whalebone Cove, it suddenly disappears in terms of the predominance of hydrilla and some other species. Just so you know, the images, that's a magnificent bryozoan on the left, which is a really unique, extraordinary, it's like a bryozoan like you would find in a saltwater system. This happens to be a freshwater one, and it's actually a colony of individual species, and they rely on the ability to not only get light, but to be able to get nutrients from these freshwater and brackish tidal marsh systems. And the center picture, of course, is one of our migratory fish. That's the American shad, but we have, I think it's believed it's 13 now catadromous fish, including the American eel, that rely on these areas in particular, and in addition to a great number of fish that use the estuary from Long Island Sound and from ocean systems. These migratory fish, like the American shad, are living, periods of time in the ocean, but they're always coming back to the places, these freshwater and nutrient-rich and protected areas in the lower Connecticut River to spawn. And finally, mussels. Mussels don't have a whole lot of choice other than their relationship in terms of reproduction with migratory fish. But once they are adults, they can't really leave a site where they are in their whole lifetime. They don't put on a whole lot of traction. So you can see that they also require the ability to filter water and to be able to get the nutrients that they need from clean water. So we have a great need to maintain, not just for our own sanity and for our own enjoyment recreationally, but there are a huge amount of species that rely on these clean water areas, and this is what makes them vulnerable if we lose water resources because of invasive non-native species. In the next slide. I wanted to point out in particular some of the listed species that we have. I mean, to some extent, the fish we can think about, we eat fish, we know what fish look like. Mussels, we've probably been able to see, maybe less so with the bryozoan, but some of these smaller species, these are 3 different species. On the left-hand side is it's called spongy arrowhead. It's listed as, to the extent that we know all of its locations, it's secure but vulnerable. And in the middle we have Ericolin parkeri, which is Parker's pipewort, if you say that 5 times fast. That is a state endangered plant. And then on the right-hand side we have mudwort, which is a plant of special concern in Connecticut. All 3 of these species are found. The picture in the background shows, again, the entrance into Whalebone Cove at low tide. These small plants are relying on the ability of the tide to expose them within a mudflat to sun and getting the resources that they need, both with tides up and tides down. So again, I think you can see that once we start getting mats of hydrilla or water chestnut, that these environments degrade rather quickly. And you could look at these small species as how many people even know they're there, how important could they be? And that's exactly why they're important, because they're part of that huge complex of what makes the lower Connecticut River so incredible and so diverse, is because we've got a whole suite of species, some of which are more common than others, but all of which interact to create a system that provides life to many species, whether that's plants or animals. In the next slide. There's a lot of literature out there. There's been a lot of papers that have been done on particularly water chestnut, on what their impact is. I thought this quote was particularly useful because in this, they're basically saying that it's been responsible for the decline in many native species of submerged aquatic vegetation. And if you're familiar with the role of aquatic vegetation, healthy systems have healthy aquatic vegetation, and those become not only the means for helping to clean water, but also to help keep erosion down, to provide habitat for fish and other aquatic species, nursery sites, habitat for some of the invertebrate species that then become important for the food chain for fish and other species. And also these areas are well oxygenated because of the plants that live. Submerged aquatic vegetation is such a unique form of plants, and we have such tremendous diversity in the lower Connecticut River and our coves and embayments that to lose that this is a photograph that was taken last year when I think that we saw this extraordinary increase in what has otherwise been gradually increasing over a period of times. And Margot and I have been working on this since 2010, and last year was like a tenfold increase in the amount of trappa that we were finding in places. In this case, this is in the inlet just on the inside of Salmon Cove. And that's the deep folks that did a tremendous amount of work in pulling out plants. So we have a lot at stake here, and some of it we know about and some of it we're less familiar with. And the final slide. I put this in here not because it's specific to the Connecticut River, but it could be. This is from 2014. I think the photographs tell you just about everything you need to know, but this is from the Mystic River outside of Boston. A lot of volunteers, 6,000, almost 7,000 baskets of water chestnuts, but that doesn't really tell you, you don't know how big a basket is, but 1,000 tons or 2 million pounds of water chestnuts. And we talked, Kelsey talked about how we could quantify what we're pulling up in terms of water chestnuts. So this starts to give you some context in what this community, what the issue was. They obviously didn't know what they had. It got away from them. They cleared 2.3 miles of the Mystic River and filled 14 30-yard dumpsters with the plant material. And in this case, they had to hire expensive equipment. And as you can see, they got a lot of people involved. And this is a heads up for us, not only because we really don't want this to happen for all the reasons that I've just mentioned, but also, this is a community that's right outside of a large metropolitan area. It has access to people and it has access to funds as part of a community that's near a metropolitan area. We don't. And I have no doubt that trappa can become every bit as aggressive as this picture demonstrates if we don't pay attention to it. And the good news is, that we're starting to talk about it. A lot of people are interested and see the threat. The greater question, of course, is going to be, can we get ahead of the curve and actually make a difference? We may not be able to get rid of it entirely ever, but we certainly can prevent a circumstance like this picture here. And that's it for me.
Thank you, Judy. That was great. And it's a great segue into Margot Burns. Margot was my office mate for many years. I've watched how she has worked over her career at RiverCog to pull together partners and to build alliances. And it's going to be an interesting aspect of this project to figure out how we pull together, as Judy said, the people that we need to gather to be able to address the problem from a management perspective. And as we move forward, a lot of you can reach out to me as stakeholders on this call, as public stakeholders, and we can include your comments and questions and insights into the final report that we're going to develop for the 12 towns. So without further ado, Margot, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Jean. And Judy, that was quite a segue into my part of the conversation here, and you didn't even know what I was going to talk about exactly, so that was very good. My role here is just to talk about stewardship, and Jean, can you go to the next slide, or John? Well, actually, go back there to that one. One thing I want to say is, see the small plants here, that's Judy, and she's taken these pictures. This is what we want to find. And down at the bottom where it's the same, I think this is Salmon Cove also last year with the Connecticut Deep crew who did amazing work. That's what we don't want to have happen. So I think over the last 10 years, we've learned a lot about how not to let that happen, even though sometimes you can't help it. So next slide there, John. Things that I'd like to talk about is my number one mantra is sustained vigilance in invasive work. Anybody who works with invasive plants, whether aquatic or in the forest, you know that it's, once you start working on invasives, you're going to, you know, the work has to continue for a long time. And then after the work is done, you still have to keep an eye out and make sure that, you know, that you have things under control. So it's going to be an always and forever item. Let's see. I have a couple things to talk about. One, local community outreach, the importance of doing surveys, and then some really good programs that we have at the state level and at the national level that we can take advantage of in our stewardship work. So for community outreach, I think that stewardship needs to take place from the bottom to the top. So from the local level, from your local land use commissions, from your local conservation organizations, to the state, county government, up to the federal level. And they all need to be coordinated, and everybody needs to talk to everyone about it. And at the community level, where I work most often, it's about having what we like to say, you know, your kitchen table conversations. So one example that I'm going to use is the survey data that Summer Sevens created last year in the GIS application that you can go and see at the CASE website, the Connecticut Agriculture Experiment Station. She had some data in there from her identification of water chestnut locations. Now, I found one point on there that I didn't know about the location. Actually, there's a few of them that I'll be investigating this year, but one in particular caught my eye, and that was a water chestnut location in South Cove in Essex, which is actually a brackish environment, and one that's curious because water chestnut is a freshwater plant, although we have doubts about you know, how much salt tolerance it has. So we're going to be checking that one out. But the steps that I'm going to be taking to check that one out is, first I will go and check the site to see if there's anything there this year. And then I will identify who owns the property that's near the house, near the location where the water chestnut was found. And then I will talk to people that I know in the community if I don't know them personally. And find out how, you know, if I could be introduced to them, or if they're receptive to maybe talking about the problem. And I will go and introduce myself, maybe send them a letter, bring them some material about the identification of the plant and how it can be controlled, and if they would, you know, help in the effort to make sure that water chestnuts, you know, kept under control in South Cove. And then I would probably take that information and provide that to all the landowners around South Cove and Essex, so that all of them are aware. And that location, because of all the docks and the boats and everything, will probably be able to keep South Cove, you know, without water chestnut. And so those are the kinds of steps that you have to take when doing your stewardship. So the other thing I'd really like to underline is finding the needle in the haystack with all of these invasives. Just finding one small little chestnut plant will save us probably hundreds of hours worth of work in the long run if we didn't find that small chestnut plant. So I think that if everyone knows how valuable their time is spent out on the water, or on, you know, a land trust property or a town park, looking for invasive plants, finding that first one, that's an invaluable stewardship tool. And this map on this page is from the work that I've done with Judy, who was instrumental in bringing the stewardship ethic to the lower river concerning aquatic invasives, and it shows the locations in the past that we've been working. Some of them have been eradicated, and others are ongoing, like the Salmon River and Selvin Cove, which one of our stewards, our star steward in the Lower River, the Friends of Whalebone Cove, will be doing a great deal of work with this year. Some resources here for people to look at. One is the Connecticut Deep Clean, Drain, and Dry site. They have the program that you can get training from to work at one of the state boat launches. Very good program. And another one is the National, let's see, no, it's not national, North America Invasive Species Management Association. They have a really great program that's called Play, Clean, and Go. And it's about cleaning your equipment, cleaning your shoes. It's not just about aquatic invasives, it's about how to stop the spread of all invasives. And that's the websites are there. And there's a link to a very wonderful workshop given by Dr. Richard Robertson at the University of North Carolina. The NASMA did the workshop with him for National Invasive Species Week. It's incredibly informative workshop concerning hydrilla. They talk a lot about it. It gave me hope in our fight against hydrilla in the lower river and for the hope for the rest of the bodies of water in Connecticut and New England for that matter. So it's about 45 minutes to an hour long and a great workshop for people to watch. So please go and look at that one. And then here's some outreach material that we use at RiverCog to send to people and to put up in various locations. And please, if anyone would like to use these as templates for their work, just contact me and we can send them along. That's it.
Thank you, Margot. That's great information, and it shows that the momentum is slowly building and hopefully will accelerate with time and patience and a lot of fortitude. We're encouraged by the numbers of people who are attending these webinars and the ones who have reached out and the views that we've gotten on the Eventbrite site. You'll notice that up on the top of your screen in the webinar, there's a little bubble for a chat screen. If anyone has insights or comments that they'd like to contribute or has questions, you can just pop those into you can open up the chat dialog and open that up. There's a lot of content in this. We're going to probably go over a little bit because this is a very content-rich segment of this whole webinar series. We've heard about the economics of the issue, but this is a lot of the natural resources. So without further ado, Humphrey Tyler has been is part of the Friends of Whalebone Cove, and we'll go over sort of the volunteer coordination. And Humphrey, with time going ahead, please take it away.
Thank you. And Jean, thank you for organizing this webinar. I think it's a great service, and I think it is going to be the beginning, hopefully, of a real upsurge in the effort to try to preserve the lower Connecticut River Valley from some of the invasives. The Friends of Whalebone Cove was organized about in 2016. Whalebone Cove, in case you're not familiar with where it is, it's on the Connecticut River, roughly 10 miles up the river on the starboard side as you're going upriver. It's a 100-acre freshwater tidal wetland, and it is it has a reputation for being one of the most biologically important and undisturbed tidal marshes in the Connecticut estuary. And as a matter of fact, it is specifically cited in the Ramsar International Wetlands Treaty as one of the reasons that the Connecticut River estuary is an estuary of global importance. The Friends of Whalebone Cove was originally formed as a NIMBY group. It was formed to oppose the application for the installation of a dock in Whalebone Cove. It would have been the first dock. And unfortunately, we lost that battle, but after that was over, we quickly pivoted to a mission to preserve the ecological integrity of Whalebone Cove. At the end of last year, we had 107 paid members representing 70 households. John, if you could advance to the next slide. Whalebone Cove is interesting and not entirely unique, but somewhat unique in that the land ownership is a mix of public and private ownership. A large portion of Whalebone Cove is owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. It's part of the Silvio O'Conti National Wildlife Refuge. The two maps that you see on the right, first is on the top is an aerial view, and then replicated just below that is a map of the parcels of Whalebone Cove. The red lines are the mean high water mark in the cove, and the various blocks of colored land that you see represent the different types of ownership. The dark green that you see is land owned by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that is upland. It's not part of the title march. The lighter green, I won't characterize the actual color because it would be somewhat pejorative. The lighter green is the portion of the cove owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So that's actually in the cove, and that's the area that is flooded at high tide. And the yellowish property that you see is privately owned portion of the cove. There are 20 privately owned lots on the cove, and there are at least 35 homes within 100 yards of the shoreline of the cove. So you've got a unique mix of fairly intense residential development, at least for rural Connecticut. But at the same time, a great deal of public ownership. Also, by the way, there's a small 5-acre parcel that fronts on the cove that's owned by the Nature Conservancy. Having the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as a landowner in the cove is both a benefit, and it can also present some difficulties. The benefit is that it's a wonderful partner. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is a wonderful partner to have, and it has helped us a great deal in starting to confront the issues of invasive plants in the cove. On the other hand, it provides another level of regulation and approval that we have to go through to get anything done in the cove. So it's a double-edged sword. John, if you could advance to the next slide. In that regard, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has been a great help with regard to identifying the invasive aquatic plants in Whalebone Cove. In 2017, Friends of Whalebone Cove was lucky enough to get a junior environmental sciences major from St. Lawrence University to donate her free time during the summer to do a survey of the invasive plants in the cove. She had a full-time job during the summer as a lifeguard up in East Hampton, but during her free time, she spent it on the cove, and she identified 7 different invasive plants in the cove. And those plants are pictured here, starting from the far left. There's our old friend purple loosestrife, and then going clockwise around, we have yellow flag, we've got knotweed, we've got the pernicious hydrilla. There's a big stand of Phragmites that you can see there, and at the bottom at 6 o'clock is one of our board members, Jim Maragoni, removing a big clump of water chestnut, of trappa, from the cove. Jim, by the way, is he's one of our board members, and he is also the chief botanist at the Roger Torrey Peterson Estuary Audubon Center. With the information that college intern provided, we started searching around for a way to come up with a plan to deal with these invasive species. And through the Connecticut River Conservancy, we got a $3,000 grant from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to come up with a plan. We added about $1,000 to that, and we contracted with Judy Preston to do a complete survey of the cove and to come up with an action plan on how we can try to deal with the invasive plants in the cove. Judy presented that plan to the Friends of Whalebone Cove last fall, and it is going to be the subject of our annual meeting, which is going to be Sunday. It will be a Zoom annual meeting, and if any of you would like to attend, you can send me an email and I'll send you a Zoom invite. But Judy will be going over her recommendations and her findings in detail. John, if you could advance to the next slide. Last year, Margot alerted us to the fact that there was a large water chestnut infestation in Selden Cove. Selden Cove is the next cove south of Whalebone Cove on the river. And when we got there, we found that there was 5,000 to 7,000 square feet. So Friends of Whalebone Cove decided to take on that infestation and try to remove it during the season. Selden Cove was not part of our mission, but it is so close, and we felt the danger of not getting those water chestnut out was so severe that it was important for Friends of Whalebone Cove to take action. So we organized 10 different forays out onto the cove involving 35 volunteers and 100 hours of volunteer time. And so we managed to remove all of that trappa, hopefully most of it before the seeds dropped. The next slide, please. In terms of operations, I've got, with regard to community-based conservation groups, particularly hyper-local conservation groups like Friends of Whalebone Cove, I can't emphasize how important it is to have a strong communications program. It is essential to communicate what you're doing and the benefit that you're providing to your community. You have to be relentless, persistent, continuous, and unceasing in that communications effort. No matter what you do, no matter how much good you do for the environment, if your community doesn't know about it, you're not going to be having the support of your community. And any initiative, any efforts to protect and enhance our environment needs the support of everybody in the community. The Friends of Whalebone Cove has had a very aggressive communications program. We've had articles in newspapers and online newspapers, and we're hoping to be on a radio show soon. We had plans before COVID came along. We had plans to go out and make presentations to the town boards and commissions and civic groups and the Lyme Land Trust and other conservation groups in the town. All of this is important in terms of building the support in your community for your conservation projects. The final slide, please. There are a lot of, there are both pros and cons to community-based conservation initiatives. I don't think that a hyperlocal group like Friends of Whalebone Cove is the solution to the invasive species problem in the lower Connecticut River, but we can be part of the solution. The advantages of such groups are self-interest, and I don't know if you can see there, but the S is a dollar sign. And I think that what we found is that those who have waterfront, those who own waterfront, have a big interest in trying to make sure that it is protected from invasive species. You could imagine a landowner who has just put in a $50,000 dock, finding that it's locked in by 5 acres of trappa. Such groups also provide pools of volunteers, on-site monitoring. They can be on top of developments. For instance, just earlier this month, one of our members reported a kill of muted swans that appeared to be a kill that was carried out by humans. We don't know who, but so that sort of having eyes on the site is important. It provides opportunity for citizen science. It provides a sense of community pride. Also, there are education opportunities. The Lyme Land Trust has a wonderful program with the Lyme Public School here every spring. Also, one of the advantages is of having free labor and services. Some of our signs have been put in by members of our Conservation Commission, and also obviously fundraising. But there are also disadvantages to having small groups. One is volunteer project management. If you don't have staff, trying to get projects carried out by volunteers sometimes can be very frustrating. It could be like pushing on a string. Seems like you never get to the point of getting anything done sometimes. Also, the organizational management time that's required of small organizations. Seems an awful lot of time is spent not on projects and programs for the environment, but just in managing your organization. Also, you tend to have a lack of expertise, particularly in the area that we're dealing with. We're dealing with botany. We're dealing with a lot of pretty technical science. It's unusual to have anybody on your board who has any expertise in that. Also, you have the situation of the thin bench and sole proprietorship phenomenon. That's basically what I mean there, is that if somebody leaves your board, if one of your key volunteers leaves, it often leaves a hole that you just can't fill. For instance, if you have somebody who's particularly good at communications and that person leaves, it's hard to continue your communications program. And the sole proprietorship phenomenon is one that I find in a lot of small organizations, and that is that the organization tends to be run by 1 or 2 individuals. Sometimes it's a husband and wife operation. And when those people retire or move away, the organization just ceases to exist and ceases to operate. So there are both advantages and disadvantages to having hyper-local environmental groups like the Friends of Whalebone Cove. And I don't think that such groups are the answer. They are part of the answer. But what is really needed, and I think that both Margot and Judy feel this way too, what's really needed is we need statewide leadership and we need federal leadership to attack this problem. The problem of invasive species in our rivers and waterways is one that is regional, and it's a landscape problem, and it can't be solved by local groups. We need the state to make this a priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Humphrey. So thank you and everybody for your patience. As I indicated, it is a content-rich session that we have here, but I think there's a lot of benefit from hearing the different perspectives and how we're facing a larger issue than just a volunteer paddle and pull. There's a lot that goes into it, and I think Humphrey eloquently put forward in his last slide what the steps are needed on a local and a state, regional, and federal level. Connecticut RC&D is certainly going to try to incorporate all of this into our ERT report. And then next, on this Thursday, we're going to see a deep dive into the issue of hydrilla. I hope all of you will come back and join us with Greg Bugsby and Summer Stebbins about the impact, the extent to which hydrilla is covering the lower Connecticut River Valley area, the coves and embayments and the river marinas itself. So I look forward to seeing hopefully some of you back on the slideshow. Again, thank you for your patience, and have a great evening.
All right. Thanks, Jean.